This is the Grief Talk Podcast with Vaughn Solis, helping you heal after loss and life's hardest hits. My guest today is Jenna Ghisolfo. Jenna knows firsthand the life-changing impact of safe and stable housing. As a young woman in an abusive relationship, her only way out was through Section 8 housing. With a baby in her arms, she made the choice to start over and rebuild her life. That second chance proved to help Jenna find her purpose. For the past 18 years, Jenna has dedicated her career to affordable housing and today is the founder and CEO of Housing Consultants of America, a national company that helps domestic violence survivors, veterans, and individuals experiencing homelessness to find stability and dignity through secure housing. Most recently, Jenna was crowned United States of America Mrs. Arizona, where she uses this platform to shine a light on homelessness and help drive real solutions to help others thrive in their life. Audience, welcome today. My guest, Jenna Ghisolfo. Jenna, pop in and say hi. We have so much to talk about today. Whoa.
Yes, it's gonna be exciting. I'm looking forward to it. It's gonna be a good conversation.
Yes, and I just love your upbeat, vibrant energy just already. And hey, audience, check out Jenna's background. That's the real deal. That's her room, and we love it, love it, love it. So, thank you for being such a vibrant energy, Jenna.
Absolutely, absolutely. Gotta bring the energy with the background. You gotta bring it all.
Yeah. So, I did your introduction, Jenna, and so we do know that you work in a lot of areas. We're going to start off right away with your story, and then we're going to move into the work you do with the abused domestic violence issues. Veterans, I believe there's some disability attached to that. You may work with some disabled veterans and homelessness, of course. And this is a passion you fell into very, I'm going to say probably naturally, passion purpose work because of your own tender circumstances that I'm going to let you tell the audience about. And then we're going to get into some questions about how your story led you to the work that you do today, share across the United States, probably can be impactful to other countries because we're all facing a problem of homelessness. So, what I wasn't clear about is whether most of your work is directed at homelessness and that's your number one initiative to end homelessness or at least provide better supports for those who as they say in Canada are unhoused, um, or if it all works together. The vets, domestic violence will say victims, and the homeless. So I'm going to let you dive in and tell us a little bit about Jenna,
Yep.
where you want to start with your story, and how you found your purpose work.
Perfect. Well, let's kind of maybe start from the beginning. I was born and raised here in Arizona, a beautiful state, incredibly hot, but beautiful, and had a beautiful upbringing, great supportive family. But when I went to college, I found myself kind of lost, as we all do, right? When we journey on our own for the first time into university, and I ended up in an abusive relationship that honestly was so, slow to progress that I didn't even realize the abuse was going on. It was so gradually done to me that ultimately it took me years to then reflect back and go, "Wait a minute, that was actually abuse. I didn't even recognize this. I was just dealing and, um surviving is the best way to put it on a day-to-day basis just to make ends meet." And so, in this abusive relationship, I finally realized that something wasn't healthy here, right? I couldn't pinpoint it, but I knew something wasn't healthy, and I ended up living at that time in Reno, and I was at a Walmart out of all places, and a woman in line, in the checkout line, overheard me having a conversation that my income was going down and I needed a place to live. And so ultimately what she did was she stepped in and she basically said, "I think I know of a place right down the road from here that bases your income on your or sorry, bases your rent on your income. That's all she could really tell me. She couldn't give me too many more details, but I thought, well, it can't hurt to just go stop by and take a look. And so I went in and it ended up being a Section 8 property. And for those that are not familiar with what Section 8 is, or maybe have just heard of the reference, what Section 8 really is it's a program provided by the government where you only pay 30% of your income towards your rent. So it really allows people who are financially strapped to be able to have some resources and additional funds to not only be able to pay their rent, but be able to sustain themselves in food and other aspects as well. So I went and applied and I got in, and my rent was only $400 a month in rent. And that was the catalyst to me leaving my abusive relationship. And I basically then said, I'm dedicating my career to giving back to those that gave me a second chance because I really felt like this roof over my head and this housing situation for me to get out of this abusive relationship was really my second opportunity. And I had an infant son at that time, and I just said, I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity. We ultimately moved into a one-bedroom apartment, and I started my life all over from going back to college, from working at Pier 1 out of all places, just to have income coming in. It was anything I could do to survive. And that's when I knew I needed to give back to the same community that gave me a second chance. And it ultimately ended up being homelessness and Section 8 or public housing that led me into this career path. I started working for management companies, housing authorities, and ultimately 7 years ago launched my own company to allow individuals who are as you and I love the way Canada puts it, unhoused. I hate the word homelessness. I love unhoused. That's a beautiful, powerful word, and really then dedicated my career to supporting as many agencies as possible across the nation. It wasn't just working with one company. It was how many people, how many lives can I touch in one day? And so now we've got over 23 consultants nationwide that are on a day to day basis pulling people off the streets, whether they're veterans, disabled,
Wow.
whatever it might be, domestic violence, we're pulling them off the streets and we're putting them into some sort of stabilized housing, whether that's Section 8, public housing, it might be temporary housing where they only have 90 days, but it's better than being unhoused, right? We're giving solutions, we're giving them opportunities.
So I don't want to gloss over, and I know you don't either, the fact that you had the courage to leave an abusive relationship with a baby. So there are a couple things going on here that I'm picking up because, as I just told you before we started recording, I was a single mom 7 years in the early 80s. And boy, was it a stigma. I had my daughter in 83. And if she got sick, for example, one time she had pneumonia and I rushed her to the hospital where she ended up, in a hospital stay. And they sent a social worker to me to make sure I
Oh.
was a good mom. And I had this talk with a social worker, and she said, "You got a better life going on than me." And that always stuck with me because the stigma was so bad of being a single parent. And so it got a little bit better, I would say, maybe around, 25 or so years ago, because we started then having issues about same sex parents. And then it just threw the whole family dynamic and what that looks like into question. And, some places are still pondering that. In Canada, we're pretty liberal and just about anything goes. So it takes guts and it takes courage. And I want to ask, did you face stigma as a newly single, or sometimes people call it now solo parent?
Yep.
And I want to find out from you how you found that guts and courage to jump off the cliff and trust.
That is such a great question, and I wish I wish more people would tap into that because, right, that is where the power comes from. That is where the strength comes from. Where I found it, honestly, I don't know. I knew though deep down that the way I was being treated was not the way I was raised, right? It wasn't these were not normal things. The way I was being spoken to, treated was not normal. And so therefore I knew I needed to make a change. The strength definitely came from within. I would say I had some great role models of some unbelievable women in my life that definitely were role models for me, especially my mom. And she was, as you like to say, a solo parent, and she raised my sister and I to be, entrepreneurs. My sister's an attorney. We're are self-thinkers and strong women, and so I think I really had to refocus and say, "Wait a minute, I know my upbringings, I know my value. Mhm. What do I need to do here to reset my life?" And taking that step was the scariest step. I remember making that decision over and over and going, "Am I making the right decision?" I'm leaving a relationship where I have some sort of security. I feel some sort of security into the unknown where I have no support. I'm doing this all on my own, but ultimately it was the best decision for me to make because I needed the abuse to stop.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Yeah, I had my daughter alone. I was already split by the time I had her, and she was born in a Catholic hospital, and she was mixed race.
No.
Yes.
Then that would have been a whole ordeal.
And also it was a small town. And the hospital was run by nuns, and people came to the nursery because for a long time she like the doc kept me in for a week because I was single. And he was a great doctor from England, and he liked me, and he was giving me a rest, but people came to the nursery room, to come see her because they had found out about her in the town. Can you imagine? I know, I mean, there's a two-edged sword here.
Yeah.
Racist much,
Yeah.
but also curious, 'cause she was half West Indian. And so, anyway, it was quite the situation. So I get the guts, but and I already had it. I had to have it because I was just like, anyway, I'm a fiery Aries, and I'm just going to tackle what I need to. But only if you're comfortable. And we're going to turn to the issues you work with. But I just want to know if today, um, what are your thoughts on, and in your country, the U.S., on domestic violence? Are there Listen, is it as rampant? Has it always been rampant? Has we've They've talked about it for years and years and years, on the Oprah show and whatever. Are there sufficient resources, or in your very, own personal opinion, do you still think women have trouble? And I'll even say men, because some men are abused too, right? But those that are being, those that are living in domestic violence situations, and I've also experienced that way back when, holy crap. And you really kind of don't see it. And you
No,
try to make it your
keeps up on
fault,
you.
right? Why
Yes.
is it your fault? And like, what's wrong with me? And how do I fix this relationship? Do you think it's as rampant and bad today, and that people are still just those same questions? And, how do people like break that cycle?
It's such a hard cycle to break because, like you mentioned, you have to have the courage to walk away, whether you know your resources or not. That's a mental step that you have to be able to willing to take. And sometimes, like we mentioned, fear is such a factor in it that some women just say, "I can't leave out of fear." And
Yeah.
I do feel this is still a prevalent issue. It's not going to go away. It's not a country issue. It's a national, worldwide issue. Like
Agree.
violence is nothing that's just in the United States or in Canada. It's in every nation.
Yeah.
And while we do have some great resources, I will say we've got some great resources. The downside is having individuals who are in a domestic violence situation, be welcoming and receptive to the resources is sometimes the challenge that we see because a lot of individuals, like you mentioned, will say, I don't feel like in a domestic violence situation. I don't recognize it. I don't see these as big issues. And so they'll kind of change the conversation in their head to justify the means, basically, as we like to say. And so while there are some great resources out there, I would say the biggest hindrance for domestic violence victims is being able to take that next step in accepting the resources and what they provide to them because it's that step you've got to take to say I'm closing that chapter or I'm closing that door and I'm going to move forward with my life. And a lot of individuals are just in this fear mode of I can't walk away. I don't know how to walk away or I won't be taken care of if I walk away from this situation, and that is not the truth. It is absolutely not the truth.
Yeah, so even in leaving and in being a solo single parent, whatever you want, however you want to call it, um, I believe, and for me, it was absolute trust and faith that the next door would open, or if I desperately needed something, I kind of asked. I was a very spiritual. I was raised Christian, but also developed a spiritual practice early on, and while it evolved like umpteen thousand times.
As it should, right? As you get older.
Yeah. Even back then though, I would ask for help. Just please send the resources and always they came my way. Did you find that to be the case for you? Um, Meeting your challenges, was it faith, trust? When you took that first step and you that decision and said, I'm leaving. I'm not talking planning. I'm talking now the day you're out the door. Where did you go? And did you have trust and faith every step of your journey until you felt, a foundation under your feet?
I mean, what a great question. Do I feel like I had the faith? Yes, but did I in my mind still have that lingering doubt that, "Oh my gosh, I'm not gonna make it, so I'm gonna regress, etcetera." Absolutely. And so that's what I think was challenging for me is, is finding that I think like you mentioned that strength to ultimately move on and take that next step. Um, it took me months. It took me months. This wasn't a quick decision that I made. This was, I went in and toured that apartment complex, and maybe 2, 3 months later, I actually made the decision because ultimately, you've got to pack up a family, you've got to move out of an apartment, and that is
A lot.
not only is it a lot physically, but emotionally, because 'cause you're closing a door, you're closing that chapter, and I did not feel emotionally prepared to close that chapter. I was definitely so scarred, so as I like to put it, the best way I could describe it was damaged at that time that I couldn't even see straight, and all I knew was I needed to move out. That was it. That was my only goal is everything else, just kinda let it fall to the wayside. Yeah. My ultimate goal was just to get into a new housing situation so I could start over, and that's where, a lot of the stigma of being a domestic violence victim comes in because you as a victim feel like, wait a minute, I can't be successful. People are going to view me differently if I talk about this, things along those lines. And in reality, it is not that way. When you start to talk about domestic violence, community pours in, people pour in to support you, and that is not what I expected. Had I wished looking back on it, I wished I would have tapped into my community support earlier on than when I actually did. And that would be my greatest advice to any current domestic violence victims is you've got the support, you've got the community built around you. Sometimes you just need to ask for help, right? That is the biggest thing is be okay to ask for that help.
Yeah. I just want to also remind folks you were the tender age of 18?
17, 17.
17. You're a baby yourself.
Yeah,
I mean, you have kids now, right? Like, well, obviously, you have more than the one.
absolutely. My son that was in that situation with me is now 19 and going into the military. Like,
You were younger than him.
that's I that is what hit me when he turned 18. Yeah. I had a reality check that went, "Oh my gosh, when I was your age, I was a single parent, just got out of an abusive relationship,
Yeah.
trying to find my way, and yet here you are and you have an amazing life and career ahead of you." So, yes, what a great way to just kinda refocus your life.
And so I just want to say also, for those that are not aware of this, the brain doesn't finish developing till at least age 25. That's the physical part. So any actions we take in our life up to that point, they're not the same we would take when we're older. And I'm not even saying 25. I was 25 when I had my daughter, and so a little older than you going into this, aloneness, and you have to do everything on your own. But it's when it's just a fact, it's just a fact. But when you make a decision, and this is what I want to jump to, I had emailed you, I believe, and I said that I really believe one major decision, sometimes made in a split second, can definitely create the foundation of change.
Absolutely.
I stick to that in my much older years now.
You should. It's a
Yeah.
great theme, and it's a great reminder.
I'll tell you why, because as life hits us and as we're talking, we're not just talking today, Jenna, about being single with a child, alone with a child. We're talking about any age, any circumstance can hit us,
Absolutely.
land us on the street, for God's sake. Okay. Anything. And, I've watched some documentaries about those on the streets. And well, in Canada here, there is a definite percentage that are definitely struggling with mental health issues and addicted to drugs. But
Yep.
there are also brilliant people on the street who have, for whatever reason, lost their career, gave it up, are choosing to live off grid and find themselves, getting booted out of the forest, out of the parks, etc., etc. I live on Vancouver Island, our Vancouver city. There's documentaries on the problems in our downtown area there. And actually, we have some small cities or towns in Canada and in British Columbia, as a matter of fact, that have declared a state of emergency
Wow.
due to, I'll call it homelessness today. Um, uh, and they don't know how to fix the problem. So, two things I want to jump to here is, I think you do agree, a split second made where this is a true decision. It was, I have to leave.
Yes.
And then you let the other pieces fall into place.
That's exactly it.
And that sets the foundation for doors opening.
Yeah, he was
Do you agree with that?
absolutely, absolutely. It's just that split-second decision that you have to go with what your gut feels in that moment, what you know is true and is right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I want to emphasize again, a split second decision doesn't mean you haven't contemplated it. So let's be very, very clear about that, folks. And Jenna and I are both here encouraging the audience, whoever this, interview reaches, um, if it's hitting a nerve in you and something's off in your life, and even if it's some dissatisfaction, because Jenna, I know you're going to agree, when you take that leap and you jump off the cliff with your first decision, the doors don't always fling open immediately, and we have to sometimes be patient, wait, we have to look for the opportunities, we have to be very intentional, and very focused sometimes, but it's very hard to do that when you're in survival mode.
Oh, yeah.
Leaving abuse and leaving any situation, we're still panicked and the brain's not thinking. And this is where support is so important. So I want to just ask again, um, are there resources available for any domestic abuse? I'm going to call it victims here. because we can be a victim and then we can decide not to be a victim. But I think that
The survivor, yep.
as a survivor, but I think that we'll just, for those that are still in it, we're going to go with that word for the moment. Is there enough? So if somebody's contemplating leaving a situation and they've finally got the guts to do it, and I'm talking about the States, I don't know about Canada, is there a number they can call where they can feel assured that they've got support?
I'm not sure if there's a generic national number. I can certainly do some research, because I'm sure there are, but local city programs, there are numerous nonprofits that do nothing but specialize in domestic violence assistance. And I would say to anyone, wherever you're located, you can always Google it for nonprofits that specialize in domestic violence because a lot of them receive government funding for individuals who have been domestic violence victims. And so they're looking to really pull people in. And what they do with these resources is not only do they check to make sure physically you're okay, right? That's the first item that they need to do. Then they're going to go down a list and see what other services do we need to provide to you. Do you need housing? Do you need transportation? Do you need food? What do you need? So then they can immediately start dispersing either out to within their own community or within their own department to find you the resources that you need. But like you mentioned, it is a split second decision. And you're right, the doors don't always immediately open, but they do open up eventually. It took me 10 years before I opened up my own business, but here we are. And I would have never thought at 17 or 18 I would have opened up my own business. It wouldn't have even been a thought in my mind. So
Yeah.
just know that once you take that first step, the subsequent steps will happen. The doors will open. It's just going to take time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really, really am sensitive to this subject because Jenna's been there. I've been there. I mean, it took me 3 abusive partners, not married, but 3.
Oh.
Wait, now starting from a teenager. Yeah, well, you were too.
For you two as well. I mean, to hear the same story, it's unbelievable how it starts at such a young age.
I I was talking to a woman a couple years ago of Gen Z, a very young Gen Z, which okay, I can't remember what are they, 18 to something, 20, 30 or something now. I don't know, something like that. And college age, brand new in college. And a group of them were still uh, displaying symptoms of
Ugh.
unworthiness and by being subjected to abuse.
Oh, no.
And this mom found out about it and gave them a stern talking to. And we were chatting about it and just basically couldn't believe the mentality was still there from younger females. It exists, Jenna.
And like you said, it doesn't go away. It's not a thing that just happened in the 80s or the 90s. No, it is still happening to this day.
Yes.
To
So
this day.
the reason I'm just, not even giving it a nod, full on taking this, and people listen. And I do believe women are abused more than males, but even for the male, because I don't think we really understand male abuse. And while we are going to turn to some other, like I said, other things in the episode right now, it's imperative. I know for you, if you're watching or listening to this, and Jenna, I know you're right with me. We know it takes guts, and that's even in a split second can be that difference between yes or no, I'm ready to pick up the phone. And I know a lot of things have to be done in secret. I know that. But I've even had to leave a situation in secret. And I just picked up the phone and called a guy from an ad, no internet at the time, in the paper who had a truck and got him to come and get my stuff. Me, my daughter, and my cat.
What
Yes. Yes. So,
do you need to get out of it? Like, holy crap.
and so it was way better. And this was just a guy I was renting a room from.
Jeez.
I wasn't even in a relationship. But the mental Control? Unbelievable, but I was 30, and I recognized it at that point.
Wow.
So while we're not focusing and making this a topic of abuse, it's essential to what you went through, and less so for me, because here's the other thing. I never turned the abuse into, because I grew up kind of watching my dad be a bit abusive, but only in certain situations.
Oh,
Yes, like if my mom wore too much makeup, she got a bit of a whack, or, it wasn't obvious. I know. I don't want to get into that, but it just, again, that was the 50s, 60s. And even spanking the heck out of your kids, that's abuse, right?
absolutely. Different time, different era. And
What parent does that? Mine.
yeah,
Corporal punishment, not quite, but almost. Anyway, so I'm just saying we've grown up and we can culturally and generationally kind of go, well, it was just a little hit. That wasn't so bad, etc. So we can condition ourselves or otherwise have someone condition us to
yeah,
understand this is the norm for you. And by the way, this is just how it is and what you deserve.
yep,
So
agreed.
we internalize it and it becomes our secret. And as you said, very hard to talk about. And so I'm praying to God in your local areas, if you are dealing with this, please, please, please somehow find the courage to at least just start looking at what support, reach out if you can,
Yeah.
even secretly, get the wheels in motion, because these people are trained to help you get out and be and feel safe. And I'm hoping they do it with pets. Do you think they do it with pets today?
I know they do because I've got homeless communities where we've got domestic violence victims, and they move everybody. It's an entire support system, right? They're not gonna leave your pets.
Yeah,
It's
right.
it's a package deal basically. Yeah.
Yeah,
I want to move on, but one last thing I want to say to this, because your work is in this area. How can, if you can answer this, how can people, following up on this notion of secrecy and so on, and shame? Oh my goodness. Um, how can they mentally and emotionally kind of discipline themselves to understand that the threats against them, if you leave, etc., that they have the support to withstand those threats?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I would say really it's understanding that if once you tap into these resources, those threats are nothing. They mean nothing. They
okay.
can't hurt you. They're just words, right? That's all they really are. And when you have a community to support you or a nonprofit or an organization that's got your back and resources, let those threats come because ultimately you have taken care of your life and you've made those next steps to improve your life. And typically your abuser is trying to put up, as I like to say, words, not physical barriers. They're putting up words to prevent you from progressing. And all they are is words. They're not physical barriers, but in your mind, they can be traps or they can be roadblocks for you not to succeed. And so, what I'd like to remind everybody is no matter what your abuser is telling you, know that your community, your resources, your nonprofits, everything that you've tapped into are going to have a better understanding and better support for you because they're seeing it from an outside situation. They've got no emotions tapped into this situation. So it's going to be a better foundation and a better tool for you to use in terms of listening to who's telling you the truth and who's not. So
Yeah,
keep that in mind.
Yeah. So isolation, things are horrible and magnified, and community, it puts things in perspective for you. So I'm wishing all of you out there, if you need to get out, change your life in any way, don't have the guts bringing it down to just those who need the courage to leave and change their life, and you're not in an abusive situation, you're just frustrated, you're scared, you don't trust yourself. Again, you can use these lessons that Jenna's sharing today, and we're talking about conversationally, to same tactics to make any changes in your life. Honest to God, if you're frustrated or just not satisfied or not living to your true potential, then change change is just required of us for growth. It's just right. It is.
Absolutely, absolutely, you couldn't have put it better.
So, I hope, audience, that's given you enough of the grit and the determination and the courage that Jenna has had, her foundation built on. I did want to ask you, what made you decide to go to, and did you go to college, a university 4-year program, 3-year? Like, what was your education?
I did, yep, I went back to university, got my four-year degree, just got my bachelor's, but it was empowering.
How old were you?
So I graduated when I was 23, 22 or 23, so I went right back in. I didn't take
Right.
that much time off,
Yeah.
but it was very empowering for me to then say, "I've accomplished this," right? Regardless of everything that has happened, I got to college, I got my degree, and now I can be a contributing member to society because I have accomplished these things.
Yeah. I went to university, it's so interesting, at 30.
Good for you.
Single mom at 30. And it was so interesting because it was one temporary job I took that my boss, it was actually working for probation and parole board. But anyway, my boss at the time said, you should go to university, Vaughn. You really, there's lots of grants. I was living in Alberta at the time, and that, so again, I want to say, could just be something someone says to you, like the lady in the store.
Yeah,
My
exactly.
boss, I never forgot that. And do you know what? I had amazing grants at the time, and this would have been 87 to 91. They were giving me something like 12, $1,300 a month, which was probably a lot of money back 40 years ago. Well, it would have been, let me see, 40, 37 years ago. And my daughter was 5, right? I got the whole thing basically funded for a 4-year program. And then I met my husband, and then I got married, and then just life changed absolutely significantly. But even getting married, I decided, you know what? I was 33, and I was like, you know what? I think I'd like to try life married now. See what that's like, because I'd been watching families and I was tired of doing it all alone. And so, fun fact, we each ended up at a dating agency, no internet, folks.
No, really?
Yes. And we were engaged after 2 weeks, and we've been married for 34 years.
I
Fun fact.
love it. What a great story.
Yeah, and we had a son. And so we have our son who's 33. And so the reason I'm saying that is decisions, decisions, decisions. I think I'll get married. So that was a decision, folks. That wasn't waiting around and kind of like, oh, I hope I meet someone, because I was never going to meet someone in 1988, or I think it was 80, 89, whatever it was. Are you kidding? I was so busy, single mom, university. Wasn't that fun going to university as a mom?
Oh,
Isn't that cool?
it was a different experience than I had ever planned and imagined. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I had daycare paid for my daughter, and this time now I was in Ontario. So not only did I do this, but I moved across the country. And just by looking and not being embarrassed, and sometimes we do have to go to social services, whatever you call it. Do you call it that in the States, or welfare?
Exactly.
Social services?
Social services.
Right. And they're, hey, let me tell you about this. Oh, you can have snowsuits free for your daughter. Oh, she has a dental free. Oh, we'll pay for her daycare. And I'm like, if I hadn't reached out because I was so humiliated or embarrassed, or the stigma, remember,
This that is
the
it.
80s, very, very stigmatized. Something's wrong with you. Yours is a little different. It's because you left a married. Were you married?
Yeah, I was married at the time, yeah.
So you're like, you've got that domestic abuse, still hard, not saying it wasn't, but I had a child totally out of wedlock. Out of wedlock.
Yes, yep.
I'll bet you some of the audience doesn't even know what that means. But anyway, ask and ye shall receive.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. What would you say was one of your biggest challenges though? Because like you said, there was that stigmatism back then. I'm a single parent. I need support. I need social services. I need this. What would you say was one of your biggest challenges in that time?
To feel secure.
Oh, yes.
And I wanted to provide my daughter with stability. So I put her, and I'll ask you about this with your son, because how long were you alone with your son? To what age was he?
7 or 8 years, I would say, before I got into another relationship, yeah.
Same. So I met my husband when my daughter was 7. Janaea was 7, and we married when she was 8, and we had her brother when she was 9. And then we moved overseas and lived in the diplomatic corps and all this stuff. How I look at my life is chapters. And I look at my life like, holy crap, I think I've experienced just about everything. And there's not too much left for me to kind of experience to be able to connect to people. And so I have a deep empathy and an understanding, and in my bereavement now, compassion for anybody's pain, anything, anything. But I also have had a spiritual practice since I was 25. So I lean into the metaphysics and also coaching to help other people tap into their own sense of power and actual real steps to change their life when they're just bored or don't think about it or not confident enough. I've been there, done that. And so every sort of scenario, every chapter that represents a significant life altering scenario, you know, I've just used it as life experience.
Mm.
And frankly, I don't want any more of them. And
I can't blame you. You've had your life worth of it, you're done.
yeah, and um so it's been interesting, but the point I want to make, and now we also live in a society. I don't know, tell me if you feel this in the States, but in Canada we're really all embracing, even if it's on the surface. But we're just built that way. And I'm not talking super left leaning. I'm just talking in general as a whole. Anything kind of goes, and we're very supportive with our medical, and we got our problems, don't get me wrong. But we're gonna have same-sex marriage now, 15 years ago. Okay, done. Oh, same-sex couples can adopt. Okay, we're done, and it just sort of, it's just we kind of evolve as society, culturally and socially changes. I don't know, we want to get into a conversation about the United States, but and other countries, but for sure it's just part of our mentality. So I kind of already fit into all of that, doing things just in a different time period,
Yeah,
way more like advanced in terms of time than what has socially become. People don't even look at anybody that has kids on their own today,
agreed, agreed, and
right?
it's not necessarily the same in the United States. I would say we've got that underlying tone of we're all supportive. I think obviously with politics and once you put emotions into it, then you start to get some opinions into it that then filters your viewpoint. But ultimately, yes, we're on the same page as like you said, when things change, laws change, we're gonna go with it. We're gonna adapt, right? You might have the
Yeah.
pushback like you do in some by some individuals who are not going to be happy. But ultimately, if the law changes, that's what we've got to adapt and we've got to move on, right?
Right.
There's
So would you say though the idea of the nuclear family, well, broad, and there are definitely those that think you need a mom and dad, and uh and well, two kids and the picket fence, but to be the epitome of the family. Would you say in general, I'm talking in general, when you look at services, I'm not talking politics, I'm talking about when you look at what's provided services and the matters that for state or municipalities they're addressing and seeing as a problem, which we're now going to get to homelessness, the unhoused. But would you say that the general viewpoint as to what a nuclear family is broader now in the States and more encompassing?
absolutely, absolutely, especially because you see more and more families are merging, especially after COVID. The generation families are coming together, and you've got generations living together, which is sometimes the best support, right? You've got grandparents living with grandchildren, and what a sense of support that you've got then from that one household. It can be definitely a chaotic household, but you've got
Yeah.
some family there that is providing you with additional support.
And for those who've traveled, or even come from other cultures in, Asia, Southeast Asia, other Middle East, it's the norm to live together.
Absolutely. You have generations living together, and that's not even a question. You just
Right.
live
Right.
together. That's it.
And so I actually think culturally, as we've grown further and further apart, in our thinking, and like kids leave at 18, you know, um, you all be independent from each other. You live in different cities, states, provinces. Um, I think that that has contributed to damage of the social fabric, quite frankly. I do. And I think it's within all of us who have families. We need that support and we need that connection. And I believe COVID taught us that.
Absolutely. Didn't it ever of the importance of our family members and the importance of community and just connecting with your neighbors, even if they're not your family members, of knowing what's going on and how can we support you because ultimately you're community at the end of the day.
Exactly. And, so it's really interesting. And I'm not getting into the digital part of it. My degree was in mass comm and crap. And that was before the internet. And we would speculate and what would happen if the internet can't. And well, here you go. And I think,
Here it is. Yeah.
but ruining us to a point that, good God, sometimes I want to live off grid. But so anyway, just things that and we need each other, and then I think we'd have a lot less abuse and problems if we were all together, unless culturally they're integrated into, but you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, anyway. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on and let's talk about your company. You're the founder of Housing Consultants of America. I just want you to explain to folks what you do, who you support. We did say that in the intro, but a little more specific about the mandate. And do people come to you? Or are you working more with organizations so that that trickles out to support at a different level of community? And also, I just want to say this is specific to the United States, obviously. Housing Consultants of America. However, there could be ideas that people listening to this could think about maybe for our own problems, because as we said at the top of this, at the beginning of this, this is a global problem. Well, I didn't see any really homelessness and unhoused in Southeast Asia, to be honest. I didn't, and we traveled 5 countries. But in North America, hey, we got a problem.
Mhm.
So what do you guys do?
Well, and there's a lot of countries, like you mentioned, that don't have the unhoused problem, and they've come up with solutions within their own governments or within their supportive services to ensure that there aren't unhoused families. And we in the United States have not adapted those solutions. We are certainly studying other countries to see how they did this, how we can make it work. So we're learning from other countries still to this day as to how they're able to do it and not have, like you mentioned, going to Asia and not seeing any homeless individuals. There are countries that have successfully done this. It's just how do we then duplicate it in the United States and then also provide the funding or the supportive services that these families need. And that's where we're running into funding issues and you get into all the political issues, but there are countries out there that don't have any homeless problems like you mentioned, and it's a beautiful thing.
Well, do they actually, quick question, have you looked at Scandinavian countries? Because my understanding is that I'm not sure they have the same issues like Sweden. I don't know about Denmark, but they have a structure that I know years ago they even had like co-ops.
Yes.
Co-op in Canada used to be okay, a few decades ago, would be sort of like your Section 8. Your rents would be lower and you had to apply to get in and you didn't pay market rent. And once people were in there, I mean, it was like private little estate for them. And they almost never left because once your rent starts at like yours was $400 or whatever, when you have your increases, it's on that $400. All right. So, it's very hard to get in and we don't have. So here's our problem in Canada. So I want you to talk about yours. We don't have anywhere to put those who are on the streets. We don't have the money. We don't have the buildings. We don't have the infrastructure.
That's it. That is it. You tapped into it perfectly. And that's the United States problem as well. Other countries is we just don't physically have the place to put them. And the problem is we can't build those structures quick enough because it takes a year to a year and a half to build a housing complex. And then you're talking about, costs to build the property and all that other stuff. So really what we're seeing is we can't build quick enough for the need. And so what can we do to be creative, yeah, to not have to build from the ground up? And so a lot of the conversations we're having is how can we convert old hotels into housing? How can we convert old dormitory house dorms or schools for that matter, because classrooms can be turned into a shelter? How can we get a little creative in how we just convert housing, because building it brand new takes too long. So what can we do to just restructure? And that's where I think the United States is really pushing a lot of their efforts, is being creative in what can else can we do, because we can't build, we don't have the land, we don't have the money. What can we do to just say, all right, here's an already pre-established structure. All you need to do is basic modifications. Like a hotel. A hotel is already set up for housing.
Hey, off the top of my head, what does so I want to come back to this. Tiny houses, container housing, and 3D and 3D housing.
Okay, okay, keep that in the top of your mind. But tell me, what is the absolute number one or two priorities for your company, Housing Consultants of America?
I'd say our number one priority is to house individuals that are currently experiencing homelessness, whatever that means to them, whether they're living in a car, in a shelter, on the streets, wherever they're living. Our primary focus is to get you into housing. And we do that on a national level. Our second primary focus is to then ensure compliance, right? Ensuring that these people that we're putting in here aren't millionaires that are trying to scam the system, and these are obviously individuals that need the support. So those are our top two priorities when we deal with housing. I'd say a lot of our clients tend to be developers or management companies or housing authorities that have the vacancies, that basically come to us and say, we've got a vacant building.
Okay.
Can you help us fill this? Because we've got an investor deadline of, let's say, the end of the year.
Yeah.
We have to ensure this property is 100% occupied. Can you help us fill in with these bodies of individuals that need this support? And we basically go in with a team and we lease that property up.
So, okay, cool. So when you do that, so you work with stakeholders, and you fill their problem, which is
Yep.
usually, how like I got to get someone in here.
Yep.
And are they kind of doing it money motivated, or is it a combination? Sure, we want to get the money, but we also want to help.
No, so a lot of this, and this is where it becomes very surprising, is it's not money motivated. It is honestly because they've received the federal funding in advance.
Okay.
So in order for them to fulfill that federal funding or that grant that they then have to house it with individuals that are homeless, domestic violence victims, veterans, whatever the qualification might be.
Okay, and so that is very impressive.
It is so rewarding, the stories that I hear from individuals that have said, "I've been homeless or living in my car for 3 years, and this is the first set of keys I've received in decades," right? Little stories like that that just fill my day.
Right. So when your company is working, I'm just going to call them stakeholders for to encompass everyone you're working with. So let's take that as an example, because I want people who are watching this, as if they're individuals and go, "Hey, I could use that."
In order to benefit from what your, Housing Consultants of America does, so you have a stakeholder, they got a, let's just say, a building, a dorm, whatever it is they've got a grant, they need to put bodies in there because they really want to help. I need somewhere to live. I
Yeah.
am in Chicago. How do I find out about that?
Easy. So there's a website that's called affordablehousing.com.
Okay.
And basically, you type in your city or your zip code, and you can then find any properties that are registered as affordable, whether it's Section 8 public housing, we've got a million other different programs that are out there. Those are just the 2 most commonly referred to, and then you can look and say, "All right, these 5 properties are within a 10-mile radius of where I live. Let me see if they have any availability, and if not, let me get my name on the wait list because they might have availability next month or the following month." So, there is a one-stop shop for US residents, at least, to be able to see what resources are available in my city, zip code, wherever you might be.
Right. So again, I just want to emphasize to the audience, if you're in need of something and are looking for, at this moment, we're talking, this is housing. This is to solve a shelter situation. Go to affordablehousing.com, plug in your zip code, look for availability, and see. Now I have to ask a realistic question.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, what is the likelihood that I'm gonna find a place that's literally vacant and there's not a year or 2 or 10-year waiting list?
That's a tricky question. Honestly, they're all probably gonna have some sort of wait. Now,
Right.
I do get properties on occasion that just say, "Hey, we've got a vacancy and we've got no wait list, or we've got nobody that qualifies because it's a 3-bedroom and we have to have at minimum 3 people to live in here." So we do get the one-offs, but what I tell people is get your name on every wait list possible because
Okay.
you wanna obviously have more options available to you than none. Some properties on that website are maybe only gonna have 2 to 3 months wait, whereas others, if they're in higher demand or larger cities, you might see a 1-year wait. But again, you don't know what your situation is going to be in 1 year. So getting your name on that wait list is just the best way to start.
Right. So again, I just want to summarize this and make sure I've got it right, because I feel this is kind of unique what you're doing. Is it?
It's it's not unique, but it's rewarding.
Oh,
That is the best way I can put it. It's just at the end of the day, it's rewarding for
Well, are there other organizations then doing what you're doing?
no. Some nonprofits do what I'm doing to some extent, but there are not as many. No, no, we've definitely cornered the markets in really being those boots on the ground that go into the cities and pull people off the streets and say, here's what we've got. It's a 2-minute walk from here. Are you interested? You're literally sleeping on the streets and this building is 2 feet from you. Are you interested? And honestly, one of the biggest hiccups we see when we're dealing with homeless individuals is that they don't have the proper documentation to then apply, right? They don't have a driver's license, they don't have a birth certificate.
right.
They don't have the essential documents. And so we at Housing Consultants of America can't help them get those documents. However, we always have the resources to be able to say, here's your local organization that can get you your birth certificate, that can get you your driver's license.
Yes.
So we always know what those resources are before we go into that community. So we can then share them because when we're just a leeway into housing, but we've got the resources to provide extended circumstances to those individuals.
Right. So to be clear, there are those that would want to go to the website affordablehousing.com and initiate this on their own.
Mhm.
And then you've got another avenue, I guess,
On the ground. Yep.
on the boots on the ground.
Yep.
And literally your folks, they work, do they work for your organization?
Yep, yep. And so we basically, well, to give you an example, let's say a property in Atlanta is vacant and they have 100 units that are vacant. Well, we might send a team of 4 or 5 individuals to Atlanta for a few weeks or for a month and
Yes.
say, go fill this property up. And then they start to look around and say, all right, where are the homeless shelters within this area? Where are the nonprofits that have temporary housing that we can tap into because those are prime tenants for us to pull from.
Right. Just a quick question. Do you guys have domestic shelters in the US like we do in Canada that are
Yes.
very secretive? So
Absolutely.
even if we want to donate furniture or anything, linens, anything, you have to know someone who knows someone who knows someone to get the number to call and say, yes, we'll take their stuff. It's almost to the point it's so secretive that that sometimes I've wanted to donate stuff and I just can't because you have to know some stuff. Anyway, people, but in do you also with boots on the ground? So I just want to cover, so boots on the ground, this is where you're talking about it might be veterans, definitely homeless encompassing any person that someone from your organization would just go up to them, say, "Hey, are you," I'm paraphrasing, but yeah, "Hey, are you interested? We've got a place that we could put you in, a shelter. Are you interested?" And they may or may not say yes, depending. If they say yes, then they check and make sure they have documents, because you do need the documents to move in and actually quote, well, are they renting a place or is the place paid for them?
So they're renting a place because they have to pay, even if they have no income, right?
Yeah,
There's a rent amount. So if they have absolutely no income, I mean, we're talking zip, zilch, nothing,
right.
then they have to pay nothing in rent. But if they, let's say, are receiving Social Security or retirement or whatever, they might have a pension, even if that's a minimal amount, we're only going to look at 30% of that and say that's all you're going to pay in rent when you move into this property. Then the rest of it is going to be government subsidized. And then if all of a sudden tomorrow you get a job making 50, 60,000 a year, then we're going to adjust your rent based on what you're actually making.
Right. So how successful is this program that your organization, I'm just saying the program itself, not the organ, but the program. How successful is this? Like, um, are a lot of developers, stakeholders coming up with buildings that they can offer? Like, when you say as an example 100 units, like, was that realistic, or is
Yes.
that literally
Oh,
coming
very
up?
real, very realistic. Anywhere between
Wow.
50 to 150 is realistic for a developer to buy or to build.
Uh-huh.
Um, but like you mentioned, it's hard to find for developers and providers. The funding is being decreased each year. So the more and more that we can produce, the funding is being cut. So we're struggling, and we have to get kind of creative then in our partnerships, our funding structures. But certainly when we do get these new buildings released, we are having a field day leasing them up.
I think I read in Canada, I kid you not, that they're converting a prison to condos.
See, now I don't know who's going in.
So, a couple of examples. When I mentioned, and we're at the top of the hour, so I'm going to ask one more question after this, but I just want to say about the tiny house containers 3D. So, I know. So, we're in Canada here, we're not allowed to have tiny homes unless they're on wheels. But even then, you have to have somewhere to park it. Okay. And blah, blah, blah. And so, I am a huge fan of tiny house communities, and I would love to see crown land. So in Canada, we're having the conversation about donating buildings, crown buildings, federal buildings that aren't being used, or selling them off to developers or whatever, blah, blah, blah. But let's actually also take some land and allow people to live in tiny houses that aren't on wheels. There are very successful communities. I believe they're allowed in the States, or at least some states, because I've seen some YouTubes, and in some other countries. 3D printing. If you ever watch 3D printing,
Is it that fantastic?
I would live in a cement 3D
Oh,
house.
I totally would too.
Would you?
Yes.
So they're fast and they're much cheaper, half the cost or more of a traditional build. And so why isn't that industry, you know?
Yes. Well, and the other one that is very popular, like you mentioned, is containers, right? The shipping
Yep,
containers. Oh,
yep.
there's a project here in Phoenix that is made all out of shipping containers that were just simply stacked on top of one another and then kind of modified a little bit. The downside to those is it's more uh cost prohibited because the initial upfront costs for those isn't the cost for them hasn't dwindled down to an affordable cost for
Really?
income families just yet. So once that happens, or once grants start becoming available more so for the tiny homes, and I think that just takes legislation to just say we're gonna allow this rather than an apartment. Why can't we allow a tiny home or a container where we're
Yeah.
recycling our materials?
Yeah.
It does make sense, but it is It is in the works. It is absolutely in the works.
So in Calgary, I don't know if you've heard of Calgary, Alberta.
Yeah.
Okay, it's just down from Arizona. I've been to Arizona numerous times. Calgary is in the process of just finishing it'll be I believe it's an 8-story container. Um, they call it an apartment complex. It's right downtown, and they've stacked them as well.
Yep.
And so you have a container and another container, so front to back, and then up. And I think it's 8 stories. Anyway, I read an article about 2 weeks ago. So it's happening. So the downside of it is, and this is a stigma thing. It can, and I'm just going to be really honest, okay? When a city decides to do this and you do mixed income, mixed economics, mixed everything. I love Gen Z has this situationship word.
Right?
Have you heard that?
You must have. Who came up with that, right? Situationship. I know.
Gen Z.
There you go, yeah.
And they're doing it because I have a situationship at my job. I don't want to be here forever. I just want your job for 3 or 4 months and then let me grow and go.
You get
But anyway, um, so I'm having a bit of fun with that. But so, cities and I also believe housing has been very politicized in our country and making it red tape and things like that. So, in our municipalities and so on and so forth, the developers will get grants from the feds, but they lose them if they don't build the quota.
correct, correct. Yeah.
And where I live, it's very expensive. And so to get the people here and then to get the people off the streets, there are a number of things, but it can still cause a beautiful domino effect when you just get started and do this work. Is there anything else you want to say about that? I want to close off with you talking a little bit about Mrs. Arizona.
I just love him. Love it.
As your platform, let's be clear, unless you love being in beauty pageants, but you won Mrs. Arizona?
Yes, Mrs. United States of America, Arizona, and now I go in March, the end of March, to compete for nationals in Las Vegas, and it's all about just standing for not only my platform in homelessness, because as we know, talking about homelessness, it's not a sexy topic that a lot of people like to talk about, but I'm trying to bring awareness to a subject that is just it hits every community. It's not like we mentioned, there's only a few nations that don't have this, and so it's a subject that I'm just trying to make people more aware of in their communities to support the individuals who need the support.
Yeah, it's really like I think part of the problem in homelessness is that they don't know how to solve it. That's just a fact. And I live in central Vancouver Island, and just before the COVID, we actually had an area that turned into a tent city here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it lasted. Wasn't a pretty look. So we're just an hour and 15 minutes north of Victoria. So most people have heard of Victoria, BC. Right. So I'm in the middle of the island. And our little city isn't as sexy as Victoria, and it's not as touristy and stuff like that. And that's just the way we want it. But it became a problem. And what happened when it became a tent city is people came in from elsewhere in the province and maybe in Canada, more and more tents. There happened to be some abuse issues that happened, some not very nice things that happened, fire that happened to because we don't have very very cold winters here, but anyway. So what they did, and we're talking about 6 years ago now, is they did take a section of, I guess the city owned this property off a major street. And when I say major street, it's a little 4-lane street and it's our busiest street. But yeah, we have 100,000 people. So we're not exactly in the woods, but it's not a huge city. And they housed them in containers. And now they weren't stacked, and they've put a fence around it, about an 8-foot fence. And for about the first year or two, if we drove by, we would often see a cop there, whatever. But the last several years, it's like just a peaceful, I guess, little community. And so that's another solution is they find these areas that cities will donate or whatever, and then they find the people who are willing and want to have their own little home. And I don't know what they're doing for money, but just like you talked about, our city has like the people to address all the different support areas. So it's
Yeah, to
the professionals. And I think that's another wonderful way. So, I mean, containers have their place. For us, they do. And in many ways, they're very small. They're not huge, massive containers. They're still quite small. But in general, I don't know how many organizations are working in Canada like yours is, because that's not an issue I follow. And this is the first time I've talked about this issue on my podcast, but which is only 3 years old. But I thought it was so appropriate because I wanted to say on a bit of a closing note is, you know, anything culturally that is a sore eye or an eyesore, we call it, it's a problem for all of us.
yes, absolutely.
You know, and I lived downtown when they had the tent city. And we walked everywhere, walked to appointments and walked to coffee and blah, 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 And we have a beautiful, beautiful sea walk. And it was becoming a problem when people were parking themselves on the sea walk, and which is our one big tourist draw kind of thing. And well, there's many, but that's one. And it felt dangerous.
Oh, and then over the
Aspect of those that are living on the streets and do have mental health problems and on drugs and stuff, it became a little bit scary. And they cleaned it up here. I just want to say they cleaned it up. Now when one says they cleaned it up, it is true, a portion of them found another area of the downtown and parked themselves there. So I don't know. My husband is involved with the city and community association, and he meets with city council, and he does stay up to date with other community associations, of which they want membership and volunteers from residential areas to address problems. And that's one way of finding out: are they camping in our parks? Are they living in cars on their streets? Which some people were sleeping in their cars.
yes.
So it's just to be aware, and we don't have the answers, but what you're doing is a huge step forward to educating awareness and making it okay to talk about, other than if you're just an official that's working in the business and trying to solve a problem.
Isn't it? That is so true. That is so true.
We don't talk about it. Do we talk about it over, chai latte and how do we fix this problem? No, it just remains one of those stigmas that you're glad it isn't you.
Mhm. That is the best way to put it. That is the
Yeah.
best way to put it. As long as it doesn't bother me or impact my life,
Yeah.
we kind of just push it to the side and we don't talk about it.
Yeah, and we do have an issue. I just want to say on closing, like we do have quite a community of van livers and on the West Coast, and it's because they can't afford rent. So they live in their vans and they might park in Walmart, and then municipalities are responsible for whether or not people. Oh, and the other thing is people are moving into recreation RV sites.
That is it. That is a huge another avenue. You're right.
But they're also managing that, because then you're breaking the law, and they're only supposed to be for tourists and only for seasonal. And so you've got the fight of them having to move out of their fifth wheel and park it somewhere else. So this is an issue. It's not just even being homeless, it's not being able to afford rent, folks.
Yes.
That is a huge issue, and so your company addresses that as well. So I really want to just end with asking if there's anything else you'd like to just talk about if I missed. Otherwise, it's been very informative.
Yeah.
We had a great conversation. This has been a great chat. I love it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Me too. Did I miss anything? Did you want to leave our
You
audience?
covered everything, and it's been such a pleasure. And just describe, the end all messages. No matter what situation you're in, there are community resources, whether it's from your family or outside community. There is always support for you. Sometimes you just have to be able to ask for that help or know where to go for those resources.
Yeah, and circling right back to where we opened up, it does start with you folks. You have to propel yourself, or at least take that first tiny step, and then watch yourself propel in
Yes.
into a life that, maybe you even dreamed about and maybe you didn't even know where it was going to take you. And Jenna and I, and I'm sure millions of others, are examples of this. And so I thank you, Jenna, for sharing your story and for all you've accomplished. You're amazing, amazing. And I'm really, really proud to have you on my show and share this episode and at least contribute to the conversation.
Well, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for having me. It was a pleasure, and I'm glad we got to connect.
Me too. Me too. Okay.